On this episode of the Sports Opinions podcast, I have Bob Pockrass, who is a Fox Sports NASCAR reporter and USA Today contributor, and we talk a whole bunch of NASCAR. And then we also talk about his favorite sports atmospheres and the events that he thinks are the best in all sports. So without any further ado, enjoy the show. What's up, sports fans, and welcome to the Sports Opinions podcast. I'm your host, as always, Alex Cuesta, and with me today is a guy that I think a lot of people, if you are a NASCAR fan especially, you're going to know this name. He's someone that I'm extremely grateful to have on a sport that I used to be a bigger fan of, I'm not going to lie, but I still constantly poke my head in, check standings, and do things like that. He is Bob Pockrass, Fox Sports NASCAR reporter and USA Today contributor. What's going on, Bob?
Not too much, Alex. How are you doing?
I am doing rather well. So, like I said, I've stopped following NASCAR a lot because Matt Kenseth is gone, and Matt Kenseth was my driver for years. Did you ever?
So you're not happy that Joey? So you didn't watch when Joey Logano was stuck in the garage for 24 laps a couple of weeks ago at Dover, and you didn't watch that and just cheer?
No, but that would have made me really happy. And fun fact, Joey Logano, I was at his first nationwide race over in Dover. I was at that race live, cheering for Matt Kenseth, but watching Joey Logano do his first ever time in NASCAR. So that's a little interesting tidbit there.
Yeah, that's sweet.
So we're going to get going with some NASCAR stuff because that is, that's what you work for. It's what you do. And you pay attention to that a lot. And if you're ever on Bob's Twitter feed, you will know that he is the source to go to for a lot of NASCAR stuff. And one of the things that I noticed going on your Twitter feed as of late is there is a rumor going on in NASCAR. Now, anyone that doesn't follow NASCAR doesn't really know the rivalries that go on with these certain brands. There's teams, and then there's the brand names, the Chevy, Ford, Toyota, those different brands. And there's a rivalry between all of those companies in getting the best stock car out there to compete. And there was a rumor going around that Chevy is going to possibly put consequences on other Chevy drivers that don't work together and then choose to maybe work with other companies. What is the rumor? What is the kind of concrete reality behind that? Is that something that might happen?
Well, Alex, it's really just for Daytona and Talladega, where drivers rely on one another to push each other in the draft. And if you don't get a good push from somebody, there's a chance that you will fall out of the draft and lose the lead pack. And so what happened at the Daytona 500 is that Toyota only has 5 cars. So they went to Hendrick and they pretty much did a deal with Hendrick and say, hey, we'll help you if you help us. And they were like, okay, if it comes around, we'll help you if because there's about 18 Chevys and then about a dozen Fords. So they were like, yeah, we'll help you to kind of break us up. Well, Denny Hamlin went on to win the Daytona 500. And that didn't make Chevy people very happy. So fast forward to this weekend at Talladega, and even before that, the Ford has each manufacturer in the last couple of times they've gone to these races has had a meeting among their drivers and said, hey, help out the drivers in your manufacturer first. Well, Chevy did that on Saturday. And then what happened on Sunday at Talladega is that there was a rain delay, which actually pushed the last 2/3 of the race from Sunday to Monday. But during the rain delay, all the Chevy drivers got in the same room they were in the day before, and they met again. And Chevrolet apparently didn't like the fact that maybe there were 3 Chevys up at the front. In 3 different lanes. They're like, you need to work together. Now, were there repercussions talked about? Corey LaJoie, who's not a Chevy driver, said on his he has a podcast, he said that he heard that Chevy said, well, you may lose your courtesy Tahoe or you may not get more time in the simulator if you want it. Now, I don't know that any driver who's getting paid millions of dollars is going to worry too much about losing a Tahoe if so they can do something to help themselves. And I think they know that if they're in the hunt for a championship, they're going to get their simulator time. So there's a lot of question on whether how much stock to put in. And it's just like if anybody's boss says, hey, we'd like you to do this, you know that if you don't do it, will they take it out on you? Yeah, maybe somehow, some way, a little bit. And I think that's kind of what's happened here. Chevrolet pretty much like, look, we need you to work together. Do not push a Ford to the win in this race. So, it was optics of this were a big thing because, it happened in the kind of when everybody was around and all the cameras are there and all these Chevy drivers come out of this meeting. And, and I think people kind of accept it when it happens the day before. When it happens at kind of halftime, it wasn't a very good it didn't create a very good response. And the fact of the matter is typical in these races, half the field was crashed out at the end. And so it really didn't really come to matter at all because there weren't enough of any manufacturer to really for them all to hook up together. So, I think, it wasn't good, for the sport to have that storyline. But, it's also, do you blame the player or do you blame the game? The game at restrictor plate racing is you need help to get pushed to the front. And, and so who's paying you the most money? Chevrolet is paying you a lot of money or pays the teams a lot of money. And so that they're obviously going to want to wield some influence.
Yeah. And I think it kind of makes it difficult on some of the drivers too, because a lot of these drivers, especially the young guys, have all come up together. So now they might not be racing for the same company, the same team, but it doesn't mean that they're not friendly. And I've seen before guys that aren't on the same team and even some different brands just have a past with each other. And if they see that, okay, my car is not the best today, I know even if I get up to the front, I'm going to get passed. I don't have that in my car today. But I'm a Chevy, but my buddy here, I've been racing with him now for the past 15 years. We're good friends. Our families know each other. He's in a Ford. He needs this win to get it to, continue into the playoff. I'm pretty much locked in. Let me push him. I feel like that draws a little bit of a difficulty there, and I get it, and I think everyone understands the business side of it. But just as a person, I've seen it happen before where other people from other teams push other teammates, and it happened a lot, which I don't want to mention it, but the car tomorrow, it happened all the time.
Yeah,
and I'm so happy that car is gone.
And the other thing about this is that the Chevy nose is pointed, much more pointed at the front than the Ford or the Toyotas, and that makes them difficult to push a little bit. So the other manufacturers can have a little bit easier time pushing each other, and they get a better run. So the Chevys were kind of probably at a little bit of disadvantage to begin with. But is it any different for a fan to say, oh, he pushed his friend versus he pushed his pseudo teammate of a Chevrolet? I guess it just depends on who's making the order. I joked with some people, would it matter if the Nationwide car was told he can't push the Geico car, right? I think you've always had that, right? Would the Miller car help the Busch beer car? Maybe not, just because kind of who's, or what your bosses may think. But I also know that they often will do what will get them the best finish for themselves, because they're greedy, and in those last laps they don't usually think with their heads.
No, but you got to be greedy in a sport like racing. And we talk about the team aspect and pushing each other and drafting. And I think if you're not a seasoned NASCAR or racing fan, the team aspect is kind of fallen on deaf ears there, because a lot of people, they just see the different color cars, they just see all the different numbers, and they just think it's every man for themselves. Do you enjoy watching the team aspect when, a few members from Gibbs are up there against a few members of Hendrick, and now it's team versus team? Do you enjoy watching that when the teams actually work together to try and win races?
I actually enjoy it more when it's teammates who don't like each other, like a Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin used to be, and knowing that they were racing up there and seeing what they would do to each other.
Or Casey Mears and any of the other Hendrick guys, because they did not like Casey at all.
Yeah. Well, except for Jimmy. Jimmy Johnson, Casey were pretty tight.
They were, yeah.
But yeah, it's. I mean, I don't like. I mean, I'd like it to be every driver for that drive, looking out for that driver alone, and I don't want to see teammates helping teammates, but I also understand that it's part of the game in NASCAR. I just I think that the more in general, I would say that people root for drivers or they root actually for manufacturers if they have a long history as like a Chevy family or a Ford family. I
Mhm.
don't really think that they root for teams all that much. I mean, I know some do, but I would say that if you pick the majority, it's either they root for the manufacturer and that's why they root for a certain team, or they like certain drivers and that's why they root for those drivers.
Yeah, I feel like Hendrick is the only one that has like a super strong following, and I really think it's just because we got Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson back to back, and the Hendrick name was just pushed so much to the forefront more than most other racing teams. So I think that's really one of the reasons why we have that. Now, looking on a broad spectrum here, like I said, I was a Matt Kenseth guy, so now that Matt isn't racing anymore, I kind of poke my head in a little bit. Don't. Who right now is on the horizon or currently racing that is the future of the sport? Because we had guys like Austin Dillon, Ricky Stenhouse, who to me just really haven't panned out. They're still there, but neither of those guys came exactly what they were supposed to be. Who right now are you predicting to be the future of the sport of NASCAR?
Well, I mean, if you look at the driver who won the most popular driver vote last year, or probably win it this year, still alive in the playoffs right now, but it's going to be tough for him to get out of this round is Chase Elliott.
Mm-hmm.
I think, he drives for Hendrick. He obviously has the family name, obviously very popular. He has the potential. Does he need to lead more laps and kind of be up front more often? Yes, but Hendrick hasn't been the stout Hendrick team of the of the 90s and 2000s so far. So we'll see about that. It's a great question because you look at a guy like Joey Logano. He's only he's not all that old. I want to say he's 29 or 30. So he potentially is going to be around for a long time. Will he be that dominant driver? If you're looking at young drivers coming in, I think Christopher Bell has a lot of potential. Tyler Reddick, possibly. I think Bell still maybe just a little bit ahead of Reddick just because of Bell's, just with being with Gibbs versus Reddick being with Childress. I think Bell could really shine. But, I think it also remains to be seen. You're going to have a new car in 2021, and that could change everything. We've seen it before in the sport when a new car could favor some people and not favor others, and it's still a little too early to tell how that car will impact certain drivers.
Now, two-fold question here, and they're two completely different questions, but I think you can handle it. First, has Joey Logano lived up to the hype? He was definitely hyped as the next guy. You talked about him being young enough to hang around, but is hanging around going to be good enough? I think of guys like Terry Labonte, who was a really good driver, but he just kind of hung around. He was a really good driver, won races, but he was never the dominant guy like a Jeff Gordon, like a Dale Earnhardt. Is Joey Logano ever going to be that guy that just takes NASCAR by the reins and this is my sport for a solid 3, 4, 5 years?
That's a great question. I don't know. It's possible. His 9 wins in the playoffs since the elimination format started in 2014 is the most of any driver. So he has that going for him. He knows how to win under pressure. He's a driver. Again, he's just 29. He already has nearly 400 starts. He has 23 wins and 22 poles. I mean, it's if he doesn't reach Jeff Gordon level, I don't know if he's going to be all that upset about it. If he reaches Terry Labonte level of a couple of championships and a Hall of Fame career, I think he'll be pretty satisfied. And he's certainly well on his way to that. I mean, I see him winning another title before it's all over for him. And again, 23 wins before he turns 30 next May. That's pretty stout.
Yeah, that is, when you lay out the numbers like that, I think just as like a kind of casual fan, when I look at it, I just don't see him being when Jeff Gordon, Dale Earnhardt, Jimmy Johnson, and even right now Kyle Busch, when they are just getting going, if they get to the front, you never expect them to lose it. Where if Joey's up front, there's still that chance that he might give it away. So that's where I look at from him. Speaking of the car that's coming up, do you have any insider stuff about the car that isn't currently out that you can let the people know right now?
Well, they did a test at Richmond last week, and it's got, if anybody watched NASCAR's All-Star race, it does have aero ducts that come up through the hood. Those have been moved kind of to the front corners, a little bit closer to the front corners of the hood. So you'll have, kind of like muscle cars do, you'll have these air vents with the air coming out from there. It's going to have there'll be composite bodies, so they won't be steel bodies anymore. But these composite bodies, now when you hit the wall, you won't do as much damage. And if you hit another car, you're probably not going to cut the wheel of the other car. So those are a couple of big things that car will have, that the casual fan will see. And then also the wheels are going to be bigger. They're going to be 18-inch wheels. So then, so that will allow, should allow for more grip, right? The more tire that's on the surface, the more grip you tend to have.
That's the theory. So how do you see this new car, a lot of the new things and not being steel anymore, the difference in probably just the way the shape, they always come out in a little bit of a different shape than the car that was previously there. How do you see this affecting in the way that they race? How is it going to affect the draft, the pack? What do you think after all your years of experience and a little bit of knowledge about the car? Is it going to have a major impact on how they race, especially at restrictor plate tracks?
It could. I haven't seen the numbers on it yet. What's going to happen is that this car is going to be supplied more by vendors than teams building their own parts and pieces. So theoretically, things should be more even, which should even up the pack. Not necessarily at Daytona and Talladega as much, but at a lot of tracks. Theoretically, that everybody will have a little bit more access to the same parts and pieces. Now, certainly they'll still have their engineers and still will try to develop the cars as quickly as possible. But at least at the beginning, you should see teams being a little bit more even. Again, this car should be more forgiving if you do hit the wall. And then coming in 2022, most likely, it'll be a new engine, and this engine will have the way the car's being built now is being designed so that when they bring in the new engine the following year, it will include some electrification, some hybrid type technology, and theoretically what they hope is that they'll be able to store energy so that they can have a 550 horsepower motor, potentially either under braking or caution or both, have it run on electric power, store that energy, and then give that car more horsepower during the race. So that could really change the dynamic of how these cars drive, but still a little bit too early to predict.
That sounds like it's going to be some pretty cool stuff and definitely something to watch out for. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here with this question. Once Jimmy Johnson retired, called it a day, he never really, there was no one to pass the torch necessarily to. And a bunch of guys kind of vied for it. I feel like Kyle Busch has really stepped up and taken the mantle as the guy in NASCAR. He's had a great career. He's done some awesome things since Jimmy Johnson has been out of the sport. Would you put Kyle Busch necessarily right now as we speak as one of the all-time greats, where when we're talking about the greatest drivers of all time, we're talking about the Pettys, the Gordons, the Johnsons? Is Kyle Busch's name going to come up in the future?
It's going to come up. I mean, I don't know if you'd ever have the argument if he would belong on the Mount Rushmore drivers, which I think you could probably with Jimmy. But you look at Kyle, he has 55 wins. I think with Kyle, it's just going to be a matter of what, as things continue to change, is he going to be able to change with them and still want to continue racing these cars? I think it'll be, I think that the question is still out on Kyle Busch, and quite frankly, I don't know that you're going to see another driver like a Gordon or a Johnson who just seems to be kind of unbeatable over a 4 or 5 year stretch. Just kind of nature of the way the cars are now, the fact that it seems like, teams are sharing more information. I just don't see it happening. I don't know that you're going to get somebody like that. I don't see anybody like that right now, and I'd be surprised. I'd be surprised if it happens.
So another question to put you on the spot, because that's just fun to do to people.
All right.
Who do you think is the greatest driver of all time? I know it's very difficult to say because the cars are so different all the time, especially from generations. And I've never watched Petty or Allison or some of these other guys race who were, I've heard and seen video of how great they are. To me, it's a little biased because of my age. I'm only 30.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Jeff Gordon because I've never seen a guy be able to go from restrictor plate to regular track to road course and just dominate every single which way. That would be my pick. Who do you have?
Oh, that's a great question. If you talk to the people who watched, many would say Pearson. Even though Petty had the most wins, a lot of people would say Pearson, is the best. And you did put me on the spot with that one.
I did.
I would tend to. I would tend to agree with you just because as you talked about that Gordon seemed to be able to go from just was so good on a variety of tracks and had some seasons there where he was unbeatable and beating what I would think is potentially or arguably the deepest competition that there was. When you look at from kind of 92 to the mid 2000s when Gordon won the bulk of his races and the fact is that Gordon, who knows how many championships he would have had if you had a season long point system, right? You probably would have had at least a couple more.
Oh yeah.
If they did. So the fact that he was able to be so good over so many tracks or so many and over such a long period of time, he'd probably get my vote. And that's not just because he's a coworker of mine at Fox.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with picking up your coworkers either.
All right.
So last thing kind of on NASCAR, we have a little bit later to talk in comparison, but last thing is the playoff in general. I found that I find it to be more exciting now. It was always cool during the early generation where before the playoff, when the last race could really have meant a lot. If the numbers were close, it was awesome. But the playoff gives it a whole new dynamic with the elimination style and everything like that. How do you feel about the playoff system?
Oh, well, I think my favorite system was the traditional 10 race chase, where I felt like a driver had, when Jimmy Johnson and Jeff Gordon were battling for the title and they had averaged, a fifth place finish over the last 10 races to win the title. Like, to me, that was incredible. That was to do it over that long length of a time. This current elimination format it creates a lot of excitement, but I don't necessarily look at the champion the same way. I look at maybe more as a way you would look at in other sports. So who gets hot at playoff time? And, maybe they didn't have the best year and maybe weren't the best team, but they put themselves in a position and they won when they had to. And that's the way I look at this current format. I'm not a huge fan of one race for drivers. Whoever's best in the one race is the champion. I wish it was like over the last 3 races or something, just because, look, I know the Super Bowl and the NCAA basketball championships are kind of one game for all, but you had to win in order to get there. And in this format, you can kind of run top 5 the entire way and get to the final. And in those other sports, you never have to worry about the ball deflating, I guess.
Yeah, or getting into a
before
like that
during the final. While a race car has parts and pieces, and I'd hate to see somebody who would win in this version of playoffs 4 or 5 times, and then come to the last race and have an engine blow and just not even have a chance to run for it.
So would your version of improving this kind of be going back to the chase? Because I was a big fan of the chase as well, and I felt it made it, you fought your tail off, you made the cut to make the chase, and then it was another season.
Well, I mean, that's what I enjoyed, but I think, I think when you look at this, I mean, certainly can be argued, with NASCAR's, the current interest in NASCAR these days, but the dramatics and the pressure and the, you don't know it's over until it's over is certainly there, and it's hard to argue with that.
All right, so we're going to move on to our next topic. And one of the things I like to do with all my guests is I like to ask them a series of questions. And one of them is, what's their favorite sports teams, players? And you gave me a nice ambiguous answer. And it's fine and it's fun because I like to talk about a wide array of things on this podcast. So it made it actually cool to have me wrap my brain a little about how to approach this. But you said that you just enjoy really cool sports atmospheres, which I think the common fan and many fans can definitely attest to and kind of agree to that the atmosphere sometimes makes the event better than the actual game itself or event.
Yeah. I mean, look, I started my career at the Daytona Beach newspaper in the early 90s, got to cover World Cup soccer games in Orlando, in 94. And you can't beat that atmosphere. You can't, cover a lot of college football, when you're standing on the field.
Bob, real quick.
Yeah.
I don't want you to cover our current United States men's soccer team. Please don't cover them ever, because they are terrible right now.
Yeah.
But go ahead, continue.
I cover football championships, and I was on the field. I covered some of the wide rights, the historic Florida State Miami rivalry.
Don't talk about those.
Oh, sorry, didn't bring us up.
I'm a Florida
bad.
State fan. Don't talk about those.
But so just those type of atmospheres are incredible. I think that's what I enjoy, kind of as being a sports writer. Now, growing up, I grew up a Mets fan, a Giants fan. Yeah, my family is from New York area, so Rangers. There's Rangers, Mets, Giants, and Knicks. So I still have a lot of those roots with me, but I don't lose any sleep if those teams win or lose.
So the bad news is you're the absolute antithesis of all of my sports teams that I like. Yeah. I'm up here I grew up in New Jersey, up here in New York as well. Nets, Yankees, Jets, and Devils. So we're the complete and total antithesis there. But putting it on you, I'm putting you on the spot a lot, but we're going to do that again. Which would you rather watch? Because in sports, it's always been said there's nothing better than the two words Game 7. So which Game 7 would you rather watch or cover? A hockey Game 7 or a baseball Game 7 to win it all?
Wow, that's a tough one. I would say, I would say probably baseball, because I just, because I think because you have all the, which pitchers are left, who can they bring in, who can they pinch hit? To me, I think I would enjoy, I'd probably enjoy the strategy of a Game 7 baseball game rather than Game 7 hockey is thrilling, but it's, I don't know that there's as much strategy to be determined in that, right? That you're going out and you're watching them play, and who's roughed up who, and you might be looking at matchups, but I think the Game 7 baseball, just there's just so many different pieces. I think that would just be a little bit more intriguing to me.
So you're a fan of the chess match that is baseball, essentially.
For sure.
So last thing, being a NASCAR guy, I got to put up the biggest NASCAR event, the Daytona 500, up against basically all the other major sporting events and their greatest atmospheres. Where would you rank, where would you put the atmosphere year in and year out for a Daytona 500, which if people don't know, NASCAR is different. They put their biggest event to start the year, not to finish the year. Where would you put that excitement to start the season, the Daytona 500, up against the other major atmospheres of the sports?
I would rank it. It would be. I mean, it certainly would be the number one atmosphere to me was the Indianapolis 500. No, I don't think it would be hard to argue with that. I moved to Indianapolis when I was 10. The atmosphere there, that community there, I think that would have to be number one. Super Bowl would probably be number two. I've never been to the Masters, but I get the feeling that might be number three. And then I would say Wimbledon probably four, and then Daytona maybe five. And it's hard because all the other sports. Well, I would say NCAA basketball championship five, and then maybe Daytona, because I'm just thinking of. Especially the NCAA basketball, everybody's such in a closed arena. The others are so different because you have home teams and away teams, right? So it'd be hard for me to compare the Daytona 500 to any of those, because you'll have. I mean, it's always going to be a frenzy because you're in the home of the team with the home field advantage. So you're not Fenway Park. When they haven't won forever. It's going to be, that atmosphere that one time is going to be incredible, but it's certainly probably different than, let's say, a team that's won than maybe the Warriors at home on Game 7 in the NBA final, right? Because it's kind of been there, done that.
Definitely. All right, Bob, thank you so much for joining me on the show. It was lots of fun, bud.
Hey, thanks, Alex. I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Again, this is Bob Pockrass. He's a Fox Sports NASCAR reporter and USA Today contributor. Bob, is there anywhere on social media that you would like for people to find you?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at Bob Pockrass, Instagram, the same place. And my Facebook page is Bob Pockrass Fan.
All right. And again, I'm Alex Cuesta, host of the Sports Opinions podcast. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at @A_Cuesta30. Find Sports Opinions on Twitter at SportsOpinion30, Instagram, Sports Opinions 30. Visit the Facebook page by searching Sports Opinions Podcast. And wherever you are listening, click subscribe, click review, send us a good review, bump us up the list so more people can get to hear awesome guests like my man over here, Bob. Again, thank you so much for coming on, Bob. This is Alex Cuesta, the Sports Opinions Podcast. Everybody, have a good one.